Okay, I think it's time to start again the next session. So in this session 2, titled Mindfulness of Breathing, we'll give a sort of an overview of the shamatha practice using the breath as the object. But to start this session, let's do another meditation, and we'll do the same as we did in the last session. And that is really emphasizing the preparation, the settling the body, speech, and mind. So again, settling the body to setting up a good posture, settling the speech, letting the breathing flow naturally, and settling the mind, bringing the mind into the present moment. So we'll go through these elements again in a very methodical, slow manner. And then we'll do a little bit of just mindfulness of breathing to finish the meditation. So if you'd like to find a nice, comfortable posture, let's begin that practice now. As always, we begin by preparing the body. So setting the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. A vigilant posture is to simply keep the back nice and straight. And then at the same time, allow the entire body to become completely relaxed, completely at ease. Using the out breath to relax and release any tightness or tension in any part of the body. And softening and relaxing all the muscles in the face. All the muscles around the eyes, soft and relaxed. Allowing the entire body to become completely relaxed, completely at ease. And then having established the comfortable posture, keeping the body as still as possible, avoiding any unnecessary movement. And if you find it helpful, you can take 3 slow, deep breaths, maintaining awareness of sensations throughout the body as you breathe. And then allowing the breathing to settle into its natural rhythm. Not trying to control or regulate the breath in any way. Simply allow the body to breathe itself. And then setting the mind into a state of ease, stillness, and clarity. So give yourself permission to let go of any hopes or fears, worries or concerns about the past or the future. To give yourself permission to let go of all of these things for the duration of this short meditation. Letting go of all of the activities of the mind, happily releasing them. And simply allowing the mind to come to rest. Resting in the present moment. Resting in stillness. Not doing anything at all. Simply being present. And now from that stillness, start to notice the sensations of the breath throughout the body. Simply noticing any sensations in the body associated with the breathing. And each time you get distracted from the breath, just notice that and return to the breath. So simply keep coming back to the breath again and again, patiently and happily. so we can bring the meditation to a close. So let's have a look at some of the main points now that we'll be covering in this session. First, we'll start with a short review of some of the points from the earlier session. Then we'll look at what qualities are we cultivating in this shamatha practice. Then what object should we use to focus on here? And then an introduction into the mindfulness of breathing practice. Then we'll look at the actual practice that we're going to do, and a guided meditation on mindfulness of breathing, focusing on full body. And then time again for question answer at the end of the session. So let's begin with that review. So we saw here in this shamatha retreat, this word shamatha is a Sanskrit term, often translated into English as calm abiding. And it's really describing the practice of cultivating a calm, clear, and focused mind. So the goal of shamatha practice is to develop this single-pointed concentration. So it's what's called a concentration practice. And in the Theravada Buddhist traditions, this is often called jhana practice, jhana being a different level of concentration. Why do we do this practice? Why is this practice important? We saw there in the last session that it's important in terms of our everyday life, in terms of this practice will improve our attention skills. And if we can improve our attention skills, then of course we'll be more effective in everything we do in our life. We'll have better mental balance. We'll become the masters of our mind. It also can be very much a healing practice as well, and very, very good for some health benefits. I think a lot of the physical illnesses in the modern world are to do with suppressed mental content, and this shamatha practice can be a way of healing that. And then we saw, though, that of course in a deeper level, certainly from a Buddhist perspective, we engage in the shamatha practice because it's an integral part of the pursuit of happiness, of genuine happiness, of inner well-being. That if we really want to achieve this state of genuine happiness, inner well-being, there are three core areas of practice. On the basis of ethical lifestyle, we engage in this concentration or shamatha practice. And then on that basis, we engage in the wisdom or vipassana practice to come to an insight into the nature of reality. And it's through this insight into the nature of reality that we can overcome all of our mental afflictions and suffering and achieve that state of genuine happiness. But to be able to have that direct insight, we need a very calm, clear, and focused mind. We need this mind of shamatha. So shamatha is the basis of vipassana. So here we have a quote again from Attention Revolution from Alan Wallace, where he says, mental balance is the gateway to finding genuine happiness, and shamatha is the key that opens that gate. And we saw there that in the shamatha training, there are a number of topics we'll be looking at this weekend. One topic is what's called preparation, in terms of a framework to prepare ourselves to be able to do this practice in general, how to set up our life in such a way to support this practice. We'll look at that tomorrow afternoon. And then we've looked at already the first topic within meditation, an actual meditation session, that is how to prepare ourselves well at the beginning of a meditation session in terms of preparing body, speech, and mind. And now in this session, we're going to look at two topics within the actual shamatha meditation. The first is, what qualities are we going to cultivate in this practice, and what objects should we focus on? And then we'll look at the tools and faults in the following session. So let's have a look at those topics. But before that, of course, the preparing body, speech, and mind. So we saw there that it's important to prepare ourselves well at the beginning of a meditation session. Just like in any activity that we're going to do, it's important to prepare ourselves at the beginning of activity so that that activity will be effective, will work well. So similarly here, preparing the body, setting up a good posture, a body relaxed, back straight, keeping the body nice and still. we want to be able to set up a posture such that we can basically forget about the body, that the body won't create any interference in our actual meditation practice. And then preparing the speech, we looked at that optional breathing exercise we can do. Can be helpful to let go of any negativity that maybe we came into the meditation with. Also, the 3 deep breaths can also be helpful for relaxing the body as well. And then in terms of allowing the breath to just settle into its natural rhythm, that we're not trying to control the breath in any way. Sometimes people feel that in meditation, they need to somehow make their breath rhythmic or subtle or so forth. And so what often happens is people sort of try and make the breath more and more subtle. They try and breathe more and more subtly. And then usually what happens is partway through the meditation, people go, because they're not getting enough air. So that's a sure sign that we're trying to manipulate or control the breath. So just let the breath do whatever it needs to do. We're not trying to make the breath rhythmic or anything. Just let it do its own thing. The body knows how much it needs to breathe. Just get out of the way and let the breathing take care of itself. And then preparing the mind, of course, positive motivation. And then to really, again, bring the mind into not only a relaxed state, but in the present moment, into that stillness of the present moment, and the mind being very clear. So into a state of relaxation, stillness, clarity. And it's from that basis, then we can turn our mind to whatever the actual meditation session, actual meditation practice is going to be. The preparation is important, so don't cut it short. Spend as much time as you need to prepare. Some days you can prepare quite quickly. Other days, maybe you're more agitated, a lot of things going on and the tension in the body. You may find you take quite a lot of time to prepare. That's okay. You may find that some days you need the whole meditation session to prepare. That's time well spent. So don't cut it short. Because then the actual meditation won't work very well if we haven't prepared the body, speech, and mind well. So let's now have a look at the qualities that we are to cultivate in this practice. And generally in the meditation texts, 2 qualities are mentioned, and that is stability and clarity. We want a stable mind, meaning be able to focus on an object without becoming distracted, but also to be focused in a clear way, not to overcome dullness. So here we have a quote from Panchen Losang Chigi Gyaltsen, is a great 16th, 17th century Tibetan master. In his meditation text on Shamatha here, he says, the concentration to be accomplished here is a concentration possessing 2 aspects, vivid clarity and a non-discursive single-pointedness. So a stable mind, single-pointed focus, and a clear mind. But here we see in this slide that I've added a 3rd quality, a quality that's not very often mentioned in the old meditation texts, and that is the quality of relaxation. Maybe because historically I think people were quite relaxed and so it didn't need to be really emphasized. Whereas I think in the modern society, that's not the case due to our lifestyle, constantly bombarded by stimulus, agitation, a lot of stress. Our minds tend to be very chaotic. And so we tend to bring this very tense, agitated mind into practice. And then of course, we bring a lot of tension in the practice. And then, of course, because our minds are so chaotic, we get distracted very quickly, and we feel like the reason we got distracted was I didn't hold the object hard enough. So we come back and clamp down even harder. And so we're just winding ourselves up, more and more tension. And that's just going to bring a whole lot of problems mentally and physically. And I think as a beginner in the modern world, one of the main reasons we have a lot of difficulty in this practice is we're simply too tight, we're too tense, we're simply trying too hard. So the very first thing we need to do is we need to relax, 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 relax. Because it's only on the basis of a relaxed body and mind that we're going to be able to develop any sort of sustainable stability and clarity. And here again, a quote from Alan Wallace's Attention Revolution book. He says, the relationship among these three qualities can be likened to the roots, trunk, and foliage of a tree. As your practice grows, the roots of relaxation go deeper, the trunk of stability gets stronger, and the foliage of vividness or clarity reaches higher. Meaning that we are to emphasize these qualities in this order. That first we emphasize relaxation. So we need to first sink deep roots of relaxation. If we don't, then the trunk of our stability and branches of clarity will just completely collapse. So we need to first sink deep roots of relaxation to support the trunk of stability. The stronger the trunk of stability, the higher the branches and leaves of clarity can grow. So again, to really emphasize these three qualities in this order, because each one is really the basis of the next. And I can't overemphasize this enough, the basis of relaxation. I know from my own experience and talking to many, many people that this is often where we fall down in our practice. We're simply too tight, too tense. We're really trying too hard. We really need to learn how to relax as a basis. And that's something that many of us in the modern world have forgotten how to do. So relax, relax, relax. And then what object should we use for this practice? So we're trying to develop this single point of concentration. So we're focusing on an object. And the general recommendation is use the object that works best for you. And here in Alan Wallace's Attention Revolution, he has a certain recommendation. And he says the following: to guide meditators along these 10 stages, and so we see the diagram here that we're going to look at tomorrow morning, this windy road to shamatha, and along that there are these 9 stages plus the result of shamatha. So he says, to guide meditators on this road to shamatha, I have chosen from Buddhist teachings 3 techniques that I have found effective for people in the modern world. For achieving the first 4 stages, I recommend mindfulness of breathing. And of course, that is what we're doing in this weekend's retreat. Beginning with the 5th stage, I recommend a method called settling the mind in its natural state. With the instructions from the 8th attentional stage onward, we move on to the still subtler practice of maintaining awareness of awareness itself. The technique is called shamatha, without an object. So here the practice that he calls settling the mind in its natural state is we are using the mind as the object of shamatha. In other words, observing our thoughts, the mind and all the thoughts that come up in the mind. And then the other one, the awareness of awareness, is simply resting in awareness itself. And so those 2 techniques we are going to be looking at in the next shamatha retreat in 3 weeks' time. So this weekend, we'll be looking at the first of those, the breath, the mindfulness of breathing. And each one of these 3, as Alan Wallace said, I think are very effective, particularly for us in the modern world. And as we're going to see, each one of these 3 has its own unique benefits, particularly for us in the modern world. And we'll look at these unique benefits as we go through each of these 3 practices. But first, of course, the mindfulness of breathing. So again, here from Attention Revolution, he says, mindfulness of breathing is universally emphasized for those who are especially prone to compulsive thinking. As the 5th century Buddhist master Asanga comments, so now he's quoting a great Indian Buddhist master, Asanga, who says, if involuntary thoughts particularly dominate your behavior, then focus the mind in mindfulness of the exhalation and inhalation of the breath. And then Alan Wallace comments, he says, since nearly everyone living in the modern world is coping with an overload of thinking, remembering, and planning, this may be just what the doctor ordered, a general prescription for soothing and healing overworked bodies and minds. And so I think for many of us in the modern world, this is the best object, at least initially in this practice. And the unique advantages of using the breath as the object is that, as even a Sangha said in the 5th century, is if we have a lot of discursive thinking, and I think many of us in the modern world are just caught up in obsessive compulsive thinking all the time, then by focusing on the physical sensations of the breath, that helps us to get out of our obsessive compulsive thinking mind and into the body. And most of our thinking is about the past and the future. We're rarely in the present moment. And from a Buddhist perspective, if we're living in the past and the future, that's a source of a potentially a source of a lot of unnecessary unhappiness. The physical sensations of the breath only happen in the present moment. So by focusing on them, we get out of our obsessive compulsive thinking mind, and we get out of the past and future into the present moment. And another unique advantage of the breath is that it's readily available. It's always there, and it's actually easier to focus on than many other objects that are recommended. As many of you will find in the next retreat, observing the mind, watching your thoughts is not easy. Resting in awareness is generally not easy. But the breath is a physical, tangible object. It tends to be a little bit easier to focus on. So these are the unique benefits of using the breath as the object. And I think in Buddhist traditions in general, it's probably the most widely emphasized object for shamatha practice. And for many of us in the modern world, this will be the best object to use, at least initially in the practice. And that's why, of course, we're beginning here in the shamatha practice. There are a number of variations of the breath practice that we'll be covering today and tomorrow. The first one, which we're about to do now, is what's called the full body breath practice, which we've already had a little taste of in the last session. And that is to simply notice sensations of the breath anywhere in the body. So any sensations in the body associated with the breathing. So that's a very diffuse object. And for that, you can move your attention around wherever you notice any sensations connected with the breathing. So this is particularly good for relaxation. And then this afternoon, we're going to look at the practice of focusing on the abdomen, the rising and lowering of the abdomen. This is particularly good for enhancing stability of attention. And then tomorrow, we're going to be focusing at the entrance of the nostrils. And because this is a much smaller area of focus, very conducive, helpful for improving clarity of attention. Now, some other objects that are mentioned in the shamatha texts that we won't be looking at here, of course, is often in Tibetan Buddhist traditions. When it comes to shamatha practice, they talk about using a mental image of a Buddha as the object. And that, of course, has its own benefits. But if any of you who've tried to use a mental image of a Buddha as an object, many people, particularly us in the modern world, find this is extremely difficult because it's quite a complex visualization. We don't tend to be very good at visualizing, and many of us don't really have a very good idea what a Buddha looks like anyway. So many people find visualizing a complex object such as an image of a Buddha very difficult. Some people who are naturally gifted at visualization, maybe interior designers and architects and so forth, may find this a very conducive object. But my experience in talking to many people, many people find this very difficult. Some meditation texts say, oh, you find even focusing on the breath too difficult? Okay, then find yourself a stick or a pebble, put it down and look at it. Use a visual object, or sometimes chanting a mantra as a sound, a repetitive sound. So these could be useful to get into the practice if we can't even really focus on the breath. Our mind is too distracted, can't focus at all. But a sense object, such as a visual object or repetitive sound, is a very coarse object. We won't be able to get very far in the practice with this object. So even though we may begin with such an object, we'll need to move on to a more subtle object, such as the breath or the mind or so forth, if we want to go further in this practice. And again, the general recommendation is use the object that works best for you. And so we're going to be using the breath in this practice, of course, this weekend. So we're going to start with the first variation, of the mindfulness of breathing practice. And so with each shamatha practice, of course, it's important to know what is the object that we are focusing on. And here in this particular variation of mindfulness of breathing, the object is the tactile sensations throughout the body, the ones that are correlated with the in and out flow of the breath. So you may notice some sensations in the abdomen, stomach, chest, throat, face, any sensations connected in the body, connected with, associated with breathing. That's what we're focusing on. So with this, you can move your attention around depending on wherever you most easily notice any sensations in the body connected with the breathing. Now, of course, in this and all shamatha practices, we're using what's called bare attention, which means we are observing the object directly. And the object here is tactile sensations. So we're not visualizing the breath, we're not imagining the breath or anything. We're observing those tactile sensations directly. And of course, as I've mentioned already, we are allowing the breath to flow naturally. So there is a tendency, or can be a tendency, in the shamatha practice using the breath to manipulate the breath. Because generally, again, in our modern society, we like to control things. And the breath is certainly something which we have a little bit of control over. So there can be a tendency to control it, because sometimes people feel that to have a good meditation, I need to make my breathing rhythmic, I need to make it subtle, or I need to make it whatever. So we don't want to do that. So just again, let the breath do whatever it needs to do. We're not trying to, in this practice, we're not trying to do anything with the breath. We're just observing it. We're observing the tactile sensations connected with the process of breathing. And as we saw just now, in terms of the qualities, the first quality to be emphasized in shamatha practice is relaxation. And that's what we're going to be emphasizing in this mindfulness of breathing practice, is really emphasizing that relaxation. And so what can be very helpful here and very conducive is the out breath can be a natural time to do this relaxation. So when, on your out breath, then to relax and release any tightness or tension in the body, in the mind, and on the out breath, releasing any thoughts that may have arisen. So really just release, 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 releasing tightness and tension in the body and the mind. So again, the emphasis here is on relaxation. However, there's balance. We want to maintain balance. Now in daily life, we tend to oscillate between two extremes. Either we tend to be alert, i.e. focused and tense, or relaxed and dull and drowsy. So we tend to either be focused, because that's what we tend to do in daily life. When we focus on something, we tend to tense. And then when we relax, we tend to get very dull and drowsy. So here, of course, we are releasing tension, but we're not allowing the mind to just drift into dullness and drowsiness. So emphasize relaxation, but don't let the mind sink into dullness or drowsiness. We're not emphasizing so much the stability, or we're not trying to enhance the clarity of attention here. We're simply not allowing it to drift into dullness. So whatever clarity you began with, maintain that as you're relaxing, relaxing, relaxing. So that's the practice that we're going to do now. So let's do that practice. So again, mindfulness of breathing, full body, noticing the sensations in the body, anywhere in the body connected with the breathing, emphasizing relaxation. So again, if you'd like to find a nice, comfortable posture, let's begin the practice. In the preparation, we begin, of course, with the body. Setting the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. And if you notice any tension in any part of the body, then breathe into that tension. And when you breathe out, relax and release. Relaxing more deeply with each out-breath. Allowing the breathing to flow naturally and effortlessly. And releasing any tendency to want to control or modify the breath. And setting the mind in a state of ease and relaxation. So, not dwelling in the past, not anticipating the future. In particular, letting go of any expectations for this meditation. Letting go of all of these things. And simply allowing the mind to come to rest. Resting in that stillness of the present moment. And now bring your attention into the body, noticing sensations in the body that are associated with the breath. Noticing any sensations in the body while you're breathing, associated with the act of breathing. And using that bare attention. So, not imagining or visualizing the breath, but rather directly observing those tactile sensations in the body. And the main emphasis here is one of relaxation. So, on each out breath, relaxing more deeply, letting go of any tension or agitation. Relaxing more deeply, but without allowing yourself to sink into dullness or drowsiness. Maintaining whatever level of clarity you already have. If you get distracted from the breath, the first thing to do is simply relax. Then release the distraction and very gently return to focusing on the breath. So relax, release, and return. Keep coming back to the breath again and again. we can bring the meditation to a close. And so we've got some time for question and answer now. So if anyone, again, has any questions from any of the material from this session, then switch on the mic and the webcam and ask away.
Hi, Glenn.
Hi.
This is Anya. Hi.
How are you doing?
Hi. Thanks, fine. So grateful for your offering here. Thank you so much. I have a question connected to the movement of the attention in this particular practice. So my question is the attention still, and you just recognize the sensations of the breath in the body, or am I watching out and move around with the attention? Like in the body scan, or for example, do I systematically scan the body for these sensations, or is it more an open attention, recognizing the sensations?
Yeah, the second one. So here it's not a scan as such, but again, with this particular practice, the emphasis is on relaxation. And so again, you have your attention in the body, and then you're just basically noticing, and then you're breathing, and you're noticing sensations in the body, anywhere in the body that are connected with the breathing. Hello, you there? Oh, I lost you for a moment. So
yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're not so much scanning top down or anything like that. It's just that we're breathing, and we're noticing maybe the chest expanding, and then we're noticing the abdomen moving. We may notice something in the throat area or so forth. So don't worry too much about, one breath you're noticing the chest, and then the abdomen and so forth. Wherever you most easily notice any sensations connected with the breathing, and your awareness, your attention can be quite broad. So it's not like you're zooming in on a little point somewhere. So it can be quite broad. You can notice like the whole chest sort of moving, or the whole abdomen moving. So again, the main emphasis here is just simply the relaxation. What you will probably find is that it will maybe be more helpful if you later then narrow down the focus to develop more stability, clarity. That's why we're using this for relaxation. You may find that this approach, in terms of improving stability and clarity, might be a little bit more challenging. Whereas if you then narrow down to the abdomen, that is probably going to be easier for stability. And then if you narrow down even more to the nostrils, that may be even better for clarity. Does that sort of help?
Very much so. Thank you so much, Glenn.
Sure. Okay, thanks, Anya. Anyone else have any questions?
Yes, Glenn. Hi, good morning or good afternoon.
Good morning, good evening. It's evening for me.
Yes, right. Thank you for offering us all these teachings from so far. I have two questions. One is more on the theory, and the other is on the practice.
Okay.
The first one is on what we saw in the first session, which is relaxation, preparing body, speech, and mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it's maybe a little bit facetious, but when we talk about speech,
mm-hmm.
Speech could also fit either into mind, because it's about the inner mental chit-chat.
Sure.
And so that was one thing I was wondering. And the other question was going, especially when I look at the instructions about the breathing and the three deep breaths, or the counting, blah, blah. is it preparing speech or is it preparing breath?
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Good question. You're correct in that you could subsume this in preparing mind, but it's really, it's sort of like in levels. The preparing speech is more sort of course level. And at that course level, we can use a breathing exercise to subdue the coarse mental chit chat, and also to allow the breathing then to start to flow naturally can also help in terms of subduing the mind. So this is like a sort of a gateway, a doorway into preparing the mind. It's just an extra step, in particular if we have some very coarse level mental activity, particularly, you know, sometimes we come into meditation and our mind is really agitated, it's frustrated, and then we sit down and we try to set a good motivation and our mind is frustrated or negative, and of course it doesn't really work, does it? Or it's very difficult. Whereas if we have this intermediate step of a little breathing exercise, that can help to disconnect a little bit from that, so that when we come into the preparing the mind, we're not caught so much up in this sort of heavy negative stuff. So it's like a sort of a prelude. It's like a stepping stone into the mind. So that's the first one. And then the second point was, what was the second?
My second point is, so thank you for that. My second question is, is about the practice. And I have to say that this practice, I find it challenging. I prefer either the abdomen or the nostrils. Here, it was hard for me to bump around. And then there was so much emphasis on relaxation. So then I started noticing dullness. And I was just going, okay, well, open the eyes, focus on the breath. And then I was noticing, well, you're not supposed to manipulate the breath, but I sort of was, because I mean, it was very hard not to manipulate the breath, especially when there was dullness.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, but that's good, because the first step is to notice that we're doing these things, because often these sorts of things go unnoticed. And, you know, so this is why this sort of preparatory phase and the relaxation phase is so important, to let go of these sort of habits that we have that interfere with the main practice. And as I mentioned, is that exactly what happened to you is normal, is that our strong habit in the modern world is when we relax, we become very drowsy, because we tend to oscillate between alertness and tension, relaxation and drowsiness. And that's what we do. And of course, then the problem with that, of course, is that when we focus on something, it's exhausting. I mean, we get exhausted by concentrating. And if you concentrate with a lot of, and we know from our own experience, if you concentrate with a lot of tension for a longer period of time, not only do you get exhausted, you get very agitated. Your mind gets really agitated, and it's hard to release that. I mean, your mind goes hyper, doesn't it? I mean, if you've had a whole day of that sort of attention, when you get home, your mind is like buzzing, isn't it? You can't, and then you can't sleep. So this is not very an effective way of focus. So basically what we're doing here is, and unfortunately, this is the approach that we use in the modern world to focus. We tense. And unfortunately, that works a little bit. If we don't have to focus too long, some tension can help us to stay focused. So it seems like that's what we need to do. But actually it's not sustainable, because if we focus, as I said, if we focus with tension for a longer time, we get completely exhausted and we get very agitated. So this is not a sustainable. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to relearn a much more effective way of focus. So the first step in that is to cultivate that relaxation. And as you became aware, and many people's experience is that when we start to do that, of course, we're going to get dull and drowsy, because that's what we've been doing our entire life. And so we have to practice. And so the more we practice this ability to relax and not sink into dullness, then we start to have a basis for developing sustainable stability and clarity. But it will take time. So we're reprogramming ourselves for that. And then the other thing you mentioned was, oh yeah, controlling. Exactly, as I mentioned, we control things. I mean, this is our modern world. We like to control things because somehow we feel like we need to be in control of everything, and to be, I don't know, to feel like we're happy or something. But similarly here, the breath is something we have some ability to control. But here in this particular practice, controlling the breath is not what this practice is about. The practice is developing attention skills. So trying to control the breath is something else. And generally, we're controlling the breath often in not a very healthy way here, because often what happens, as I mentioned, is people feel like to be a good meditator, they need to make the breath less, more subtle, more rhythmic. And then people push it a little bit that way. And then what happens after some minutes is that then people go, because they're not breathing enough, because they're forcing the breath to be unnaturally shallow. So let the breathing do whatever it wants. Now, of course, in the modern world, we often have not very good breathing habits. So as a separate exercise, we can, develop a good breathing habit to breathe properly. But in the meditation here, that's not the right time to try and do that. So just leave that out. And then the last point you mentioned is another reason we find this difficult is that we want to be able to attend to something very specific, because we want stimulus. And here we're sort of relaxing and we're just sort of noticing a few sensations here and there. And our mind is going, give me something, give me something. And so our mind shoots off somewhere. So again, to notice this is very good, because we start to notice all the bad habits that we've built up in our life. And therefore we have now an opportunity to start to change those habits, but it'll take time. It'll take time. So don't say, oh, I can't meditate, I'm no good or whatever. The first step is just, as we're going to see a little bit in tomorrow morning session, the first step in this practice is just simply noticing how chaotic and out of control our mind really is. Because until we start to do these practices, we can live in the illusion that, my mind is sort of okay, it's not too bad, I can sort of focus a little bit, But then when we start to do these sorts of practices, we see, wow, my mind is really chaotic and it's all over the place. It gets very drowsy. And that is really the first stage of progress. So that's good.
Thank you.
So yes, like everything, we just need to practice. And if we practice, then we will improve. I mean, like everything in life, we practice anything, we'll get better. But it takes time. But every step we do, we're moving in a better direction. Unfortunately, again, in our modern world, we have this attitude, I want it and I want it now. And of course, if we don't have it now, we get frustrated and think, I should be able to do this now. But it takes time. But again, everything we do, every step we take, we're moving in a better and better direction in our lives. So be happy. Okay. Thank you. We've got time, I think, for one last question, if anyone has a question before we break for lunch or dinner or wherever we are. Yes? Someone there?
Yes, I have a question if nobody else, but I already did one.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay, this is kind of bordering on what you just answered, but I just register sometimes, you know, when I exhale and I go down into the body, my body have sometimes like an urge to like go, you know, like relaxing, like settling in. And you just answered the previous question with saying let the breathing do whatever it wants. I'm just trying to figure out if I'm doing the right thing, because initially it seems to like it takes me a little bit out of the attention, but it also gives me a deeper relaxation. Yeah. So is it okay to just go with that ease release?
Yeah. I mean, of course, we're not forcing the breath out, but actually what many of us do is that we have this tension, and so we don't breathe out properly. And so we start breathing in before we've actually really naturally finished the out breath. So here with the relaxation, one of the key elements is the out breath. Is even though we're not forcing the breath out, we want to release any tightness or tension and let the breath flow out naturally and not, I mean, fully. We're not saying empty the lungs. We can't do that. But what we tend to do is we don't allow that to happen. We're contracting. So even before the out breath is finished, we start bringing in the next in breath. So therefore, if we can really just release that contraction and tension and let the breath flow out more fully, then the in-breath will happen naturally rather than pulling the breath in. So there's a middle way there. We're not pushing it out, but we're just allowing it more to flow out more naturally.
It feels like more like a natural like singing.
And that is really the key. The end of the out breath is really the key to relaxation. So if we can really release as much as possible any of that tension on the out breath, then we can really, that is really the key there. Okay, that's time now. It's well, depends on where you are. It's I think 12 o'clock in Central European summertime. So now it's time for lunch break. So this afternoon, so we've got a 1 hour break for lunch, or for me for dinner, or wherever you are, depends where you are in the world. And the next session, we'll go into the abdomen practice, focusing on the area of the abdomen. So now actually for what I have to do is I actually have to end the meeting here to actually allow the files to copy. So what you'll need after lunch is you'll need to log back into the same meeting, because I have to end the meeting here for allowing the files to be, the recordings to be done properly. So then sometime in the next hour, I'll start the meeting again, and we'll see you back in 1 hour's time. So enjoy your lunch, enjoy your dinner. We'll see you in 1 hour's time.